Honorable colleagues, I noticed that in the course of my speech, a representative of wives of honorable members and the leadership of my wife walked in. So we have to recognize them before we are thrown out of our houses in the evening. So,
okay, you have it, sir.
Yes.
Now I want to say we now revert to this topic.
Any member who doesn't keep clap for them shouldn't eat in the evening today. Oh, husband of the wives. Okay, I guess they are all here. Association of honorable members, not wives, spouses. So we move on. We'll proceed to take the keynote address from Professor Josh Omopitan on the appraisal of the legislative agenda of the 8th House of Representatives. It's my singular honor to now invite Professor Josh Omopitan to deliver the keynote address. Prof.
Your Excellency, the Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives, Right Honorable Suleiman Lasun Yusuf, the House Leader, distinguished honorable members of the 8th House of Representatives, very distinguished former presiding officers who are present, as well as other principal officers of the House, Her Excellency, the wife of the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mrs. Gilvia Degala, as well as the distinguished wives of the distinguished members of the 8th House of Representatives, as well as the husbands, if you permit me to say that, of the honorable members that are here. I want to start by thanking the leadership of the House of Representatives for giving me this privilege. I want to say that it is a very rare honor to come here today to come and appraise one of the most powerful institutions that is created by the democratic processes, which we started in the First Republic, and it continued up to this point that we are talking of the 8th House of Representatives. Your Excellency the Speaker, I want to start on a congratulatory note, because given the fact that the 8th House of Representatives is 2 years today, and we have to look back and appraise what has happened in the past 2 years. Actually, this is just half of the tenure. And when I was coming, a friend of mine told me that what you have not achieved in the past 24 months, is it possible to achieve in the next 24 months? And I propounded what I call the theory of foundation and theorems, that when you have laid proper foundation, it is possible to use 1 year to lay proper foundation, and you have laid very good and proper foundation, then you can fly as a jet in the next 1 or 2 years. But honestly speaking, I want to congratulate the 8th House of Representatives for what I may call the giant leaps that we have witnessed in the last 2 years. And I want to say that I am talking about the legislative agenda of the 8th House of Representatives. Let me say that it is uncommon, even in the United States, to have a dedicated legislative agenda. And one of the reasons why it is uncommon is because it is not an easy thing to put together. And so the fact that you have something which you have put together, adopted by this honorable house, and which today is an opportunity for us to x-ray and see how far you have gone, and even to examine the constitutionality and the legality of the legislative agenda which has been put together by this distinguished house. I want to say that 2 years ago, when you started the journey, and you came out with the idea of legislative agenda, most Nigerians did not take the house seriously, because people assumed that that was another political propaganda. Because what we have witnessed in the past years, we have witnessed situations of pretense in governance, and we have witnessed situations of political jamboree. But over the years, there's what we call in law, permit me to use it, res ipsa loquitur. The thing speaks for itself. So I am happy to stand here today to come and do what I consider is very simple, because the work of the National Assembly, most especially the 8th House of Representatives, speaks for itself. And I want to talk about the fact that the legislative agenda is not very popular. But on the other hand, it is one of the most important concepts in modern democratic system. Now, it is not popular in most jurisdictions, even in a presidential system as our own, just because it is an agenda is always a contestation. It is a contestation between the various groups, the various parties that constitute the parliament, and it is often a contestations also between the legislature as well as the executive. Now, one of the major problems we've had in this country really is that we have not really have an agenda, or let me say a vision, because it takes a visionary leader to be able to transform his country. And we look, sometimes you look at the Constitution, and that is one of the challenges I will leave here today, that do we really have a Constitution with a philosophy that is local, that takes cognizance of the circumstances under which Nigeria operates today. In India, there is a philosophy behind the Constitution of India. But what is that philosophy that you can take home and say it is the philosophy behind the Constitution of Federal Republic of Nigeria? And to advance the argument further, in the process of making laws, what are the philosophies and the hypotheses that guides the House of Representatives, which in line with the provisions of the Constitution is the representatives of the Nigerian people? Your Excellencies, I posit that the nature, scope, and effectiveness of any legislative agenda will depend on the form of government that is being operated. Whether it is a presidential system of government or it is a parliamentary system of government. And again, it will depend on the type of party system. Is it a one-party system or is it a multi-party system? In fact, within the party system, you also have very strong parties and weak parties. So if a legislative agenda in a presidential system, in a multi-party, and a party that is very strong, or a party that is very weak, you know, there are different considerations that goes in relation to an evaluation of a legislative agenda. And is it, do we have a disciplined party and an undisciplined party? So it's also what is the nature of the parliament? Is it a unicameral legislature or is it a bicameral legislation? But what is apparent, whatever side you want to be, is that in a presidential system of government which we operate in this country, the responsibility of legislative agenda is controlled by the legislature, in this case the National Assembly. Under a parliamentary system, the legislative agenda is controlled by the executive, and for reasons that are obvious. But let me say why I'm congratulating each and every honorable members for the 2 years of governance of lawmaking. I want to confess that I don't envy the 8th House of Representatives because of the circumstances that foisted itself upon Nigerian democracy as soon as we emerge with the responsibility of making laws for Federal Republic of Nigeria. Shortly after your emergence, the executive declared a recession. Now, you need to, as at the time you were putting your legislative agenda together, nobody thought of recession, a recessed economy. But now, this is the fact that has confronted us. And we also need to interrogate the legislative agenda as put together by this distinguished House when there was no recession in a recessed economy and a recessed nation. So today is historic because it is an opportunity for me to appraise what this distinguished House put together 2 years ago, which, permit me to say, is supposed to be the blueprint through which the Nigerian people can benefit from the lawmaking powers of the House of Representatives. I know that it is not only the House of Representatives that can make laws for Nigeria, but so long as it emanated from the House, I congratulate the House and also congratulate the National Assembly because it is a joint responsibility you have with the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Your Excellencies, distinguished honorable members, I just want to give you my immediate response or my immediate scorecard, because when His Excellency the Speaker was speaking, he said, well, it is not for him to score the performance in the last 2 years of this honorable House. But I want to report, based on my assessment, when we go to assess students, normally we grade them in 3 categories. We say, okay, it's excellent, subject to correction, minor corrections, and major corrections. But I want to say that what I have seen, what I have interrogated, despite the circumstances under which we find ourselves, that the 8th House of Assembly, what is going on here is nothing but a revolution. And one of the components of this revolution is this legislative agenda that you have put together. Your Excellency, permit me to digress. In the 1970s, Nigeria was among the emerging economies in the world. And I recalled that Nigeria was a bride to so many nations and continents, including Malaysia, Singapore, and several other countries. To the extent that several countries who are regarded as developed today, they look up to Nigeria for help. I recall Malaysia in the 70s was a country that without anything, but they came to Nigeria and explained their plight and requested Nigeria for help. And Nigeria returned or responded by giving them palm fronts. As at that time, Nigeria was one of the leading producers of palm oil in the world. But today, the story is different. Nigeria is nowhere when you talk of palm oil, but Malaysia has taken over and not only transplanted our own crop in their own country, and they are having value for it, but they have been able to develop just from one product 28 byproducts, which sustains the economy. No wonder every year Malaysians still come to celebrate Nigeria and to thank us for what we have done. I gave this example again last week at one of a talk which I gave of Singapore, who have nothing because it's an island. Even water they import from Malaysia. But today, Singapore has been able to use what they have to get what they don't have. And what is it that they have? They were able to develop their intellect. They have good schools. And they develop their engineering sector. They have the best refineries in the world. And so, they come to Nigeria and other countries to buy our crude oil, refine it and resell it to us. And they buy it at very cheap price and resell at very exorbitant price. So, when you see a people with vision, it took leaders with vision. Dubai, it took somebody to look at a land-doomed country and say, we are doomed except we do something extraordinary. And that was why Dubai today is the world-leading destination and tourist nation. It takes somebody to think, to have a vision, to have an agenda for his nation. And that is why I said, what I've seen through the legislative agenda is nothing but a revolution, because you have put down something which we have never had a vision, but may translate to become the vision of Federal Republic of Nigeria. In this country, I realize that when you are doing well, even it happens to ourselves, you don't want to accept you are doing well. Now, people always talk of the bad aspects, but it is another cause of bane of our underdevelopment, because you need to encourage yourself. And therefore, we need to encourage the House of Representatives, just like that proverbial lizard that fell from the tall iroko tree. And when he leaped up and down, there was nobody to comment the lizard. And he said, I must praise myself. Your Excellency, distinguished honorable members, we are talking of the legislative agenda. Now, I try to interrogate what is a legislative agenda. How? Because you need to know what it is. Why did we have to put an agenda together? And I find that it is not an easy thing to define what is a legislative agenda. Because most writers in politics and also in law and political scientists, they shy away from defining what is a legislative agenda. But nonetheless, when you break it into two, you have legislative and you have an agenda. Now, an agenda is a list. It's defined as a list, as a plan, as an outline, or the likes, or the things to be done, matters to be acted or voted upon. So this definition, for our purpose, cannot be proved upon. because you are talking of something to be voted upon, something to be acted upon. It is a form of plan that you have set before you and that you have set before the Nigerian people. Now, legislative is having the function of making laws or relating to the enactment of laws. So it is therefore obvious that this legislative agenda, which I have the responsibility of appraising today, is a plan, is an outline, it is a blueprint which of something to be done or matters to be voted on or acted upon by persons or bodies having the functions of making law. So if you look at this definition, therefore, no one is in doubt that it is within the competence of the House of Representatives to fashion out a legislative agenda, not only for the House, but for the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Quickly, I look at the basis. What is the basis of a legislative agenda? The basis is found in the Constitution, because under the Constitution, especially Section 4, it is the responsibility of the National Assembly to make laws for the good governance of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And therefore, the legislative powers of the Federal Republic of Nigeria is vested on the National Assembly for the Federation, which shall consist of the Senate and a House of Representatives. And the National Assembly shall have power to make laws for the peace, order, good governance of Nigeria. Your Excellencies, distinguished members, the House of Representatives therefore derived its powers and authority to make this legislative agenda under the provisions of the Constitution of Federal Republic of Nigeria. And again, the Nigerian courts, the Supreme Courts, they have held that not only that the National Assembly, the House of Representatives have the powers to make laws under the Constitution, but that also the National Assembly, the House of Representatives, they are also empowered to exercise powers which relate to the carrying out and fashioning out policies for the good governance of Federal Republic of Nigeria. And that was the decision of the courts in the case of Ondo State and Federation. Therefore, the importance of what you have done in the past 2 years, putting up this vision together, is that you have given Nigeria a vision. And even when you have a vision that is driven from the executive, the vision cannot be effective until it is approved by the by the National Assembly. And that is why one time President of India had occasion to say that he looked through the Constitution. That is Abdul Kalam, former President of India, talking about a vision. He said, I look over as President, I study the Constitution, and the more I study it, and the more I realize that it does not prevent the President of India from giving the nation a vision. So when I went and presented this vision in Parliament and in legislative assemblies, everyone welcomed it, irrespective of party affiliation. So therefore, I go straight into the legislative agenda of the House of Representatives. Now, the legislative agenda of the House of Representatives is well encapsulated in the document that was approved by these chambers in June 2015. And the legislative agenda has 10 basic principles. And most of the principles borders on the economy of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, also bordered about issues of internal governance within the House of Representatives, and it also borders about the communication between the House of Representatives and of course the Senate, as well as the general public. Now, apart from these 10 basic principles, there are about 15 main agendas that the House of Representatives has set out to achieve. And the first one has to do with the need to even determine what is the cost of governance. You do not embark on a project without knowing the costs. And one of the problems we have had in Nigeria is that we have been practicing democracy, but nobody has bothered to look at the cost or examine the cost of democracy. And one of the reasons is that because of the long reign of military regime, nobody valued the importance of democracy. But it was important, before we embrace the idea of democracy, to know what is it going to cost Nigeria. And so that is why the first major agenda that you have on the legislative agenda is to have the cost of governance. Not only the cost of running the House of Representatives, but also the cost of running the National Assembly. Because this is one of the major areas that the National Assembly has problem with the general public. That every year, what is the National Assembly doing with billions of naira as appropriation from the budget? Now, the reason why we have this type of problem, I know that the guest speaker is going to talk about this, is just simply because we have not counted the cost before we went into it. Because if you look at the Constitution, the Federation and the powers of the Federation, Section 4 established the National Assembly and gave the National Assembly the powers to make law. That was the first organ of government that was established. That underscores the importance of the National Assembly. So it is the responsibility of the National Assembly to make law. Now, to make law will cost something. So that is why it is commendable that one of the major agenda of the legislative agenda is to find out what is it going to cost us to maintain the National Assembly. But however, since the past 2 years, although a committee was set up, but the National Assembly or the House of Representatives has not been able to come out clearly with facts and figures to justify what is it going to cost to maintain a parliament. What is it going to cost to have the House of Representatives to perform oversight responsibilities, to make laws, to publish your laws, and so on and so forth. I recall, because of the fact that the laws you make are not even available to the public, I appeared before the Supreme Court on an occasion, and the late Honorable Justice Nikitobi were looking at the Electoral Act. We cited the provisions of the Electoral Act, and he looked at his own law, it was not there. So when we compare notes, he discovered that he had bought a pirated copy. Can you imagine a Supreme Court Justice having a pirated copy of the laws that are made by the National Assembly? So therefore, it is important for us to interrogate very properly as we go into the third year, what is the cost for the sake of those that will come after you of democracy, and especially of National Assembly, so that the public can be properly sensitized about what it is. Then the internal operation of the House, the number 2 agenda is also to strengthen the committee system. And there are various indices that have been given which will help in strengthening the committee system of the House of Representatives. And the committee system is to be made more effective by properly funding the committees of the House, by making appointments of the leadership and membership of the House to reflect the experience and capacities, and also to ensure that the House committee conduct their assignments within the time frame. But however, in this particular aspect, we also have several challenges. I just spoke about this National Assembly coming at a time of recession. So if you are going to do proper committee work, oversight responsibility, investigative activities under the Constitution of Federal Republic of Nigeria, Your Excellencies, distinguished honorable members, I say to you, it is not cheap. And therefore, one of the banes is that the committee system has not been properly funded so as to be able to conduct the type of public hearing that is deserving. And apart from that, you also have another important agenda which has to do with e-parliament, e-voting, and as well as digital and archiving. It is to be noted that shortly after the National Assembly, this House was inaugurated. The Honorable Speaker announced on the 26th day of May 2016 that the House is, the e-voting has been properly put together. And apart from that, the e-parliament, a committee was set up to interrogate and see how the e-parliament structure will work. Because it should be possible, even for members that are not present, to participate in legislative proceedings. On the other hand, what we have today, we have the e-voting in place, but we discovered that it is hardly used. And then the e-parliament is also in place. So it is time for the House of Representatives to imbibe that objective that is stated, because it makes governance to be transparent, and we need transparency in governance. Communication with the public, communication within the House, communication and relationship between the National Assembly, most especially between the House of Representatives and the Executive, has been greatly improved. Your Excellency, permit me to speak on an aspect that has been very, very controversial in this country, and that is the review of the national budget process. I want to say that this is one aspect that almost dimmed the integrity of the House of Representatives last year. But the good thing about it is that when you have a transparent process, you can always explain and you can defend it anywhere. Now, I have noted from my work that most of the processes, most of the procedures that are necessary for the national budgetary processes are not in place in Nigeria. But thankfully, I have gone through several bills. I have gone through the budget process bill, and I've also gone through the NABRO bill, which is intended to establish a budget office and help the National Assembly to build capacity, and also help the National Assembly to set in motion the processes of amending the necessary provisions of the Constitution that causes budgetary delays in this country. As a result of budgetary delay, I want to say that the country has almost failed. A lot of people felt that Nigeria is a failed state, because when you have a budget and then you don't implement the budget, and then this cycle of carrying over the budget project year in and year out, and you have cases of abandoned projects. So it's like a situation of pretense. We are pretending that we are good citizens, and then our leaders are also pretending as if they are ruling. Because if you cannot implement a budget, then something is wrong. Therefore, I want to commend the House of Representatives for the bills relating to putting the necessary procedures. In fact, the amendment of sections 81 and 82, which is part of the constitutional processes, the amendment of the Constitution, which committee is being chaired by His Excellency, the Deputy Speaker, is commendable, because budget should not be presented at any time. There must be a time frame so that we obviate the need of budget failures, which we often occasion in the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Now, this idea of subjecting the budget system to public hearing is also commendable. And I noted that the budget of 2017 was subjected to such scrutiny by the public. You know, the major problem in this country is question of perception. And this will help a lot of bodies, a lot of agencies, a lot of civil society organizations to be able to come to terms with what is actually happening in the act of lawmaking. The national economy, I want to say that this honorable House has been able to enact or to set in motion some bills that were aimed at improving and revamping the economy. And alongside with it, the sectoral debate, which was based on diversification of the economy, inviting the ministers, relevant ministers of ministries, to come and interface with the House. And by implication, to come and interface with Nigerian people. because you are the representative of the people of Nigeria. And it has given a lot of succor. It has given a lot of satisfaction. Because like one author said, when the parliament refused to speak, that is the threat of dictatorship. Because the fundamental rights are not guaranteed only for the citizen, but they are guaranteed for the parliament to speak and scrutinize executive policies. So that is why I will also commend the sectorial debate that this 8th House of Representatives introduced into the legislative process in this country. And I hope that this sectorial debate will continue so that, like His Excellency the Honorable Speaker said, it will be the basis upon which lawmaking will be based. Your Excellency, I've just been informed that my time is fast spent. Therefore, I thank you very much. I just want to comment about one other important achievement of the House of Representatives. And that achievement has to do with the number of bills that has been introduced on the floor of this House. I was trying to take stock that we are talking of the 8th House of Representatives now. But I dare say that the House of Representatives that has spent only 2 years and has introduced about 1,055 bills must be commended. And of course, that was the reason why this House got a recognition from the Commonwealth Organization. So I have talked about the need to put in place some laws that will affect the economy positively. And I want to say that the PIB bill, for the first time in so many years, this 8th House of Assembly has taken it upon itself to introduce the PIB bill. And not only that, they have unbundled the Petroleum Act into about 4 bills. This is also commendable because it is only in this country that oil companies can come and operate. And within 4 years, they have recouped their loss because of very weak fiscal policies. Now, by removing the fiscal aspect from governance, as well as upstream and downstream, I think that is the right thing in the right direction. And of course, the House of Representatives must be commended for that, not only for introducing the bills, but also having a stakeholders conference before the bills were introduced. Your Excellency, there are certain areas that we still need to improve upon in relation to the working of the National Assembly, most especially the 8th House of Assembly. And one of the areas we need to improve upon is in the area of marrying our legislative agenda with the reality in the society. Now, people don't talk anymore. The masses don't talk because they are too hungry to talk. But at the same time, we know that it is not the responsibility of the National Assembly to execute and implement. But the oversight responsibility is so huge. And that is why I said I stand before one of the most powerful institutions today. The challenge before the 8th House of Representatives, with all the good things you have done, with all the good work you have done, which I have appraised, is how do we translate that to the good of Nigerian people? How do we ensure that our currency is strong, the naira is too weak? What are the things to be done? We have done the sector debate on diversification, but what is the immediate impact? Are there machineries for following up after the gains that have been achieved by the House of Representatives? Your Excellencies, distinguished members of the House of Representatives, I want to end my appraisal with a quote from Edmund Burke. There is little we can achieve. No matter what, there is little the National Assembly can achieve. And I dare say there is little that this House of Representatives can achieve if there is no bonding, if there is no harmony. And therefore, I leave this distinguished Honorable House with the quote of Edmund Burke, And Edmund Burke is that British statesman and philosopher. He said, Parliament is not a congress of ambassadors from different and hostile interests, which interests each must maintain as agent and advocates against other agents and advocates. But Parliament is a deliberative assembly of one nation with one interest, that of the whole, where not the local purpose, not local prejudices ought to guide, but the general good, resulting from the general reason of the whole. You chose a member indeed. You choose a member indeed, but when you have chosen him, he is not a member of Bristol, but he is a member of Parliament. He is a representative of Federal Republic of Nigeria. I dare say that, Your Excellency, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, I know that you represent the good people of Goodwill, Tafawa Balewa constituency, but you are more importantly a representative of the people of Federal Republic of Nigeria. And it is that zeal in which you should carry on your legislative assignment. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Mapito, for that thought-provoking assessment. We were joined by our former colleagues, especially ambassadors in the executive, honorable ministers, serving honorable ministers. The Right Honorable Bao Buhari is here. He's Honorable Minister of State for Solid Minerals, one-time leader. And we have our own very ambassador here, Honorable Khadija Bukar Abba Ibrahim, Honorable Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, which was appointed a minister from the House. We are joined also by the CNA and several of former colleagues. I can see someone there, I'm not too sure I'm saying correctly, but if I'm not suffering from long-sightedness, then I think it's His Excellency, the Deputy Governor of Ondo State, and some of our former colleagues who are there. You're welcome. We'll proceed to take the lecture from the guest speaker. We all know him. He's an accomplished, He is an accomplished professional, an author, a man whose courage defies boundaries. He is not afraid of taking on controversial subjects and speaking to them the way it is. I believe that as he delivered this lecture, that he will not do so, pray and hope that he will not do so against the run of play, which is his latest treatise. You're welcome, and it's my honor to invite you now to speak to us.
I will be as brief as the keynote speaker. Last week, a bill proposing a 6-month imprisonment for persons who jump queues in public places scaled second reading in this august assembly. It was sponsored by my brother from Kwara State, Honorable Abaka Amudakanike, to whom I have a proposal this morning. If someone who jumps queue needs to spend 6 months in jail, how many months should those who jump fence with their babariga and designer suits spend behind bars? Mr. Speaker, my brother Honorable Yakubu Dogara, other principal officers, former presiding officers of National Assembly, honorable members of this distinguished house. Before Honorable Kanike begins to sing Ajekunya for me, let me express my gratitude to the leadership of the House of Representatives for inviting me here today as we mark the second year anniversary and midterm of the 8th session of the National Assembly. based on an analysis of the number of executive and private members' bills, either awaiting second reading or referred to committees, as well as those already passed, it is evident that the 8th House of Representatives has done a lot with regards to lawmaking and oversight functions. That we have worked harmoniously with the executive is also a proof to the maturity of the leadership of this House, which is commendable. However, this anniversary comes at a most auspicious time in the life of our nation, when all sorts of characters, without any mandate, are seizing the landscape to threaten other Nigerians. While you remain our elected representatives, these unelected men, and they are all men, including those who in their 50s and 60s still categorize themselves as youth, are declaring sittings, and giving quick notices in a bid to cause confusion in our country and create problems for all of us. To the extent that the legislature is the most significant link between the government and the governed, and the one charged with articulating and addressing the grievances of the people, I believe that it is in your enlightened interest to weigh in and let these impostors know that they are only speaking for themselves and that there are consequences for incitement and hate speech. In case it has not yet registered, these map drawers are calling to question your legitimacy as the true representatives of Nigerians, and the fact that they are gaining some credibility should worry you. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, while the existence of a legislative house, whatever name it is called, does not necessarily connote democracy, it is a given that there can be no democracy without such representation. So central is the legislature to modern government that from available statistics, 190 countries in the world today have some form of functioning parliament. In the particular case of our country, you make all the difference because whenever civil rule was interrupted in the past by the military, the only arm of government that was usually dismantled is the parliament. There is no surprise because this is the only institution where representatives are elected to discuss the needs of citizens, forge national policies, and resolve whatever conflicts arise within society through dialogue and compromise. But the pertinent question remains as to how faithful you are in discharging those responsibilities, and I guess that is the essence of the session we have today. In the first ever global parliamentary report by the United Nations Development Programme and the Interparliamentary Union, IPU, which focuses on the relationship between parliaments and citizens, the UNDP administrator argues that the legitimacy and effectiveness of any legislature depends on public opinion and support. But the choice of topic for today's session and the context it was presented to me suggests that there is a major disconnect between the way the Nigerian public perceive you as lawmakers and the image you have of yourselves and this house. As far as the honorable members seated here this morning are concerned, you are serving the people. But where majority of Nigerians are concerned, you are here serving only your own interest. Whether the populace is right or wrong is not the issue here. What is important is for the members to be aware that the people whose interests they claim to serve do not think highly of them. In fact, there was a joke on WhatsApp which went viral. That was just only recently. In the course of the negotiations to free the last batch of the Chibok girls, somebody quipped about why the authorities would bother to swap the Boko Haram men when they could easily have handed to the insurgents some of our National Assembly members in exchange for the. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, before I continue, let me add that there is hardly any country in the world where the legislature is popular. So the perception problem confronting National Assembly is not unique to Nigeria. Around the world, the legislature is generally rated the least of all arms of government and national institutions. Survey figures compiled by the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, which was subsequently reproduced in the IPU's publication on Parliament and Democracy in the 21st century, revealed that across the world, parliaments were less trusted than other institutions of government other instances of government. Interestingly, that has been the pattern from the past to the present. As of May 2017, that is last month, according to Gallup polling, 74% of Americans disapprove of the job that their Congress is doing, and that has virtually been the average disapproval rating over the years. The implication is that 3/4 of Americans don't believe that their lawmakers are serving them. In fact, American congressmen are so unpopular that even President Donald Trump, with all the baggage he carries, is now making jokes at the expense of them. But let me share 2 jokes by popular American actor and television host Jay Leno to illustrate my point. The first one, police in Florida have arrested a man who said he finally achieved his goal of shoplifting in all 50 states. You know what you call someone who steals from 50 states? Asked General, and he answered it, a congressman. The second, Congress approval rating has dropped to 12%. The other 88% are withholding judgment until Congress actually does something. What the first joke implies is that American lawmakers take what does not belong to them, while the second suggests that they are not working for their pay. The same perception problem has dogged members of parliament in other countries, most especially in the United Kingdom, where in 2009, a newspaper investigation exposed MPs across the House of Commons to be cheating on their expenses. So effectively, we can see that you are in good company, but that does not excuse some of the issues that rile many Nigerians about the National Assembly. For 18 good years, the best kept secret in our country was how much each member of the National Assembly was taking home every month. That was a self-inflicted problem that impacted negatively on the image of this vital arm of government, whose members are touted as receiving one of the highest remunerations in the world. Yet there are more issues, from certificate and bribery scandals to allegations of budget padding and rowdy sessions that sometimes degenerate into fisticuffs. Every negative episode involving members only serves to erode the credibility of the legislature. And the situation is not helped by the manner in which issues that are clearly personal are given privacy in the National Assembly. While committee investigations and hearings are normal parliamentary practices, turning such powers to instruments of oppression is unacceptable. Let me cite one quick example. In the course of this day editorial board meeting on Wednesday, which I chair by the way, our senior editors in Abuja had to leave for the Senate to respond to a sermon by a committee investigating a story about whether or not the Senate majority leader was prevented from entering his town by some mob as reported by our newspaper. If the Senate majority leader or any lawmaker for that matter felt aggrieved by a publication, it is not for the whole Senate to set up a committee to be investigating such story and be summoning editors. That is a clear abuse of power and a demonstration of lack of seriousness. Unfortunately, that has become a pattern and contributes to your negative perception. On matters of privileges that are personal, like the instant case of the Senate majority leader, the National Assembly might wish to amend its rules in order to mitigate the prevailing public perception that the legislature is essentially a self-serving arm of government. An effective and efficient legislature is one that really looks out for the interests of the people and works towards ensuring the executive delivers on its mandate. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, while I am not here to deprecate you and the difficult job you are doing, I believe that the foregoing background is important, so that as I conclude, I can offer a few words on the possible solutions to the perception problems. Even when I have stated earlier that the challenge is global and not peculiar to our country, there are also problems that are uniquely Nigerian and should be highlighted. There is a school of thought that the negative perception of our lawmakers derives from the hangover of several decades of military rule, during which the legislature was anathema. It is a valid argument. The situation was not helped by the fact that the first political leadership that emerged under the current dispensation came from that military background. There is another Nigerian challenge that we should not gloss over. Why the honorable members of this House were elected to make laws for the good governance of the country, and through that brings development to the people, what most of your constituents demand are instant gratifications. They want money to pay the school fees of their children, establish businesses, and sometimes even to marry more wives. If you are not able to deliver on this, no matter how many bills you sponsor in the National Assembly or how efficient you are in your oversight functions, you are a failed lawmaker in their estimation. The crisis of expectation arising from that is a major problem you confront that is highly ever discussed. Meanwhile, if you are to judge the National Assembly by Section 4(2) under Part 2 of the Constitution, which confers on the lawmakers power to make laws for the peace, order, and good government of the country, and your other principal functions, which basically are representation and oversight, I believe that this House has done very well, all factors considered. Not only have we passed important legislations, at critical efforts in our nation, you have stood up to be counted on the side of common sense and national unity. From the passage of the NDDC Act, which led to the 30% derivation principle for oil-producing states, to the scuttling of the so-called Constitutional Amendment that was to pave way for a controversial extension of tenure for the then incumbent president, with all the implications for social order, to the doctrine of necessity, which diffused a potentially dangerous political landmine in our country, and several others. We owe a lot to this institution. If the public therefore feels that you are not serving them well enough, it is because to whom much is given, much is expected. My admonition, therefore, will be that while it is important for the National Assembly to worry about its image, it's much more productive for individual members to cast a positive image for themselves by their stewardship. That is the way it is elsewhere. In an article in The Week magazine titled, "If Congress is so unpopular, why do lawmakers keep getting re-elected?" John Tabus provided explanation on why at almost every election season, between 85 to 98% of incumbent lawmakers get re-elected in the United States. According to him, most polls show that while Americans may dislike and distrust the Congress as an institution, they like their own representatives. And let me quote, that helps explain why incumbents do so well, even when Congress as a whole is less popular than, say, cockroaches, according to him. To corroborate that thesis, of the 44 different men who have been elected president of the United States, 18 of them had been in the House of Representatives. I think you should count for that. While two, James Garfield and Abraham Lincoln, moved from the Congress to the White House, John Quincy Adams served in the House after being president. What that says most eloquently is that as individual lawmakers, you should worry more about the impact you make in your constituency, state and country, as well as the kind of image you build for yourselves. With such array of accomplished young men and women, educated from the best institutions in the world, I would like to see presidents of Nigeria emerge from this chamber beginning from 2019. As I take my seat, let me make a few suggestions. While I commend you for finally opening up the finances of the National Assembly, you must also understand that some of the choices members make toward this critical arm of government. Voting billions of naira to order for cars at a time the economy is going through a recession, and majority of Nigerians experience difficult times, has not helped your cause. Therefore, most of the perception problems you have are self-inflicted and originate from this very house. You fight in the open, you spill on one another in the press, you take decisions that are not in tandem with public mood, and some members throw irresponsible tantrums on the social media. What is often ignored is that image is less about what you say or how you think of yourself, but more about what you do. While conflict cannot be ruled out in a place with hundreds of members and is wired for less cohesiveness than the executive and judiciary, you can work on a more harmonious relationship. I believe it is good that there is increasing access to the parliament with live television feeds, and I must commend the leadership of this house for the effective use of social media platforms. Such engagement will deepen understanding of your role as lawmakers, but many Nigerians still believe that the dirty deals are done in executive sessions where you clear the gallery. Anytime you go into such sessions, be sure that suspicion is there. There is also a general perception that many of the members are idle and are hardly ever in Abuja, while contributions are not due. Perhaps we can begin by publishing the attendance list while instituting and enforcing sanctions for non-attenders. Again, members sit 3 times a week and for only a few hours. And there's an increasing clamor for collapsing the 2 chambers and making your work part-time. The only way to address that is to deliver more value to the country. It is also important for members to take on important issues that will aid the country's progress. The petroleum industry bill, where the Senate must be commended, is one important legislation on which so much time is being wasted by the House. Besides, you need to identify the issues that are critical to our country. You can commission focus group discussions, expert panels, and even surveys to understand those issues that generally resonate with Nigerians and tackle them boldly and swiftly. Mr. Speaker, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, some of the issues I've identified are at the center of the image and perception body of not only the House of Representatives, but the entire National Assembly. While I believe that you are doing your best under the prevailing circumstances, given that you must also have your constraints, let me add very quickly that it is better for honorable members and distinguished senators to stir the nation with creative ideas and novel solutions than to continue to make news by scrambling over cars and making home videos. Thank you very much for inviting me, and congratulations once again for your second year anniversary.
Thank you very much for that wonderful.
That was the guest lecturer, Olusegun Adeniyi, chairman of this day editorial board. Well, he described the legislature as the most significant link between the people and the government. The guest speaker also advised the legislators against hate speech, that goes a long way to tear the country apart. He advised them to ensure that they enshrine the rule of law in the country, in spite of whoever is affected. Whenever a law is enacted, it should be obeyed to the letter. He also commended the House of Representatives for making effective use of social media. But he, however, reprimanded them against the poor attendance of members to the chamber in some cases, and he asked them to reactivate the issue of marking the attendance register. The guest lecturer also advised them to make sure that they improve on the image of the National Assembly members, as he advised individual members to exhibit a positive image for themselves, which he said it will in turn reflect on the overall impression of the House.
Assembly. Also, we have the special assistant to the president who is representing. Okay, we have the special assistant to the president who will be speaking on behalf of the executive. One-time member, one-time Chairman, Rules and Business Committee of the House. He was always citing Order 1, Rule 1. He is the only one who knows the meaning of Order 1, Rule 1. And I don't know whether he's a she or he from his attire. But because you are distinguished, that has covered the distinction between he and she. Distinguished Senator Ita Enang. We have also in our midst former Deputy Speaker, the Right Honorable Babangida Nguroje. You are all welcome. And then we have leaders of political party. Let me recognize them. Alhaji Ibrahim Kabir, the National Welfare Secretary of the APC, is here with us. We have Chief Dr. George Mogalu, is the National Auditor of APC. And we have an elder statesman, Dr. Walid Jibrin, who is the Chairman, PDP BOT. You are all welcome. Please, honorable members, one house. Please, honorable members, one house. One house. I don't want to say anything about that. Today is Friday, so we have to make haste. And we have a number of invited guests who will be delivering goodwill messages, and thereafter leaders of zones. To speak on behalf of the executive, it's my singular privilege to recognize distinguished Senator Ita Enam. You have 3 minutes, distinguished Senator.
Mr. Speaker, for you to be fair to the PDP, you must allow them to clap for the McCarthy faction also.
You can say how unpopular what you said is.
Your Excellency, thank you very much. Your Excellency, the Honorable Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Honorable Deputy Speaker, the leaders of the House, honorable members, invited guests, my colleagues, let me extend the sincere goodwill and gratitude of the executive to the House of Representatives and indeed the National Assembly. I bring this message to you on behalf of myself and my colleague, Right Honorable Suleiman Kau, Commander Order of the Niger, and the executive in general. We appreciate the powers of the legislature. We honor your work while we jealously also guard the powers of the executive. We will, in our relationship with you, continually relate on the basis of honor for each other, and we will always engage. We will not confront. So we thank you and congratulate you for 2 years of existence, and we wish you the best in the remaining years of your service. Congratulations for your 2 years. Thank you very much.
I don't know if we have the representative of the Senate President. So if you don't have anyone from the Senate, because I understand the Senate is holding its own session as well, so we'll move on. None. The representative of the judiciary. Is there anyone representing the judiciary? None. Then from representative of former speakers. I don't know if the former speakers have put themselves together and appointed one to speak on their behalf. Okay.
Speaker, House of Representatives, Honorable Yakubu Dogara, the Deputy Speaker, Honorable Lasun Yusuf, the House leaders, former speakers of this great House of Representatives, of which I stand here to represent, the representative of the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Honorable distinguished Senator, my colleague, Itaina, respected former leaders of this House of Representatives, all leaders of different places here together, honorable members of the House of Representatives, good morning. Today, I have the privilege of being asked by my colleagues, the former speakers, to represent them on this occasion. And we have resolved that we are not going to say much because of the limited time available. And luckily, the speaker has just mentioned that today, being Friday, we have to wrap up this session as soon as possible. Let me congratulate the House on its second anniversary. It is remarkable that we have had this democracy for the last 17 years. And it is a measure of our resolve as politicians and Nigerians that we have spent 17 years uninterruptedly under a democracy. I believe we must congratulate ourselves. Mr. Speaker, let me, for the purpose of time, be more particular about the House of Representatives. Let me congratulate you, first of all, on your agenda, your legislative agenda, which seeks to bring about various qualitative changes amongst Nigerians. In the last 17 years, we have had a quantum of quantitative changes, most without quality. And it is remarkable that you have brought this agenda in order to make the lives of Nigerians more qualitative. I must congratulate you on this and also congratulate the House. I believe that the House, in addition to all of the good things it had done, have to improve in other areas. And luckily, my brother Shegun Adeni had delivered a lecture on, the desire to seek to rather on the perception of the House of Representatives in the eyes of the public. And one area that I would like to suggest very strongly and highly for the House to be able to do is for members of the committees to refrain from visiting any MDA for the purpose of oversight. I believe that the House or the National Assembly as a whole must make a distinction between oversight and investigation and inspection. I think and believe that it is demeaning for members of this honorable House to be seen meeting in any MDA's office for the purpose of oversight. Any MDA that has to explain anything must be invited to this place. I believe it is more respectable, and I believe it is more acceptable. Wherever members, however, seek to inspect any project, that is a different ballgame altogether. So I thought, Mr. Speaker, that I must make this contribution here. The other suggestion I would like to make on behalf of my colleagues is that this House, this honorable House, must insist and stand for the development of institutions, political institutions in this country. There is no way, Mr. Speaker, that a young democracy like our own can make any progress or achieve any development under strong men. And for the last 17 years, this system seeks to develop strong men and not strong institutions. And we can never have a democracy under strong men. Therefore, what the House must continue to do is to continue to insist on separation of powers and shared leadership. That is the only recipe for Nigerians to continue to have a democracy. Mr. Speaker, let me thank you once again for finding it worthy to celebrate this second year of the House under this dispensation. And I wish you continued strong health. I wish you long life. And I wish all the members here the best in their endeavors. You have performed remarkably, and I pray that you continue the way you started. So I thank you all, and on behalf of my other colleagues who I'm representing, I thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to speak to you this morning. Thank you.
That was the former Speaker of the House of Representatives, Gali Umar Narbah. He just presented his speech on behalf of the former members of the House of Representatives, where he congratulated the legislature and he described their role as very significant. But he, however, says that the situation where members visit MDAs for discussion and oversight, it's not part of the legislative duties of the National Assembly.
Even though we've passed, but because of the wonderful working relationship we have with the Senate, we will reverse ourselves and allow him to deliver the speech as soon as I finish the recognitions. Also in our midst is Mrs. Amina Avong, who is Special Advisor to Cross River State Governor on Presidency and National Assembly matters, representing the Governor of Cross River State. Thank you for coming, if you're there. In the chambers too is Ambassador Chibuzo Okerike, National Speaker, Nigeria, National Youth Assembly of Nigeria. Thank you for coming. He's up there. And we have also with us Chief Honorable Victor Tombari Gladam, who is the Deputy National Secretary of the APC. Thank you for coming. And this is an introduction, a recognition that I must make. That's recognizing the wives of honorable members who are with us here. They've sent in their list. We have Honorable Binta Al-Hassan Ado, Mrs. Binta Al-Hassan Ado, Ms. Ruth Garba, Mrs. Adeola Olanike, Mrs. Baratu Yunus Ahmed, Mrs. Philomena F. Udo, Mrs. Garba Dati Mohammed, Mrs. Loma Dan, Mrs. Shadimu Ramot, Abdul Kadri from Katsina, Neka Adiolu, Veronica L. Pajok, Amina N. Onao, Mrs. Den Akpana, Mrs. Andrea G. Befwi, Mrs. Bilkisu Muazu, Stella Esu, Zainab Isa Hassan, Khadija Abubakar Sarki, Rakia Munir Aminu, Oluwase Ogunwi, Oyen Demola Fijabi, Mrs. Grace Ego, Mrs. Flores Zepania Gisalo, and they're led by my own wife, Mrs. Gimbia Yakubu Dogara. So it's now my honor to invite Senator Dino to speak for Senate President. Please, for the Senate, your goodwill message. Okay, if you want, I think because the cameras are this way, you have to come in here.
Husbands.
Okay, I'm waiting for the list of husbands of members. Once I have the list here, I will announce it. Also in our presence is the NANS president, Mr. Kadri Aruna. Mr. Kadri Aruna. Okay, I think that matter can be sorted out of the chambers, please. Sergeant at Arms, please. Distinguished Senator Dino, please, you can now proceed to deliver your speech. Honorable members, can we take our seats? Honorable Yakubu Bade.
Order. The Speaker of the House of Representatives by force, Speaker Yakubu Dogara, the Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives, other principal officers of this great green chamber, invited guests, special apology, the clerk of the National Assembly, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Speaker, if you speak the truth, you die. If you lie, you die. I have chosen to speak the truth and die. Mr. Speaker, I bring to you special respect and salutation of the irremovable President of the Nigerian Senate, Dr. Bukola Saraki. He's asked me to appreciate the House of Representatives on the occasion of our 2 years in the National Assembly. Mr. Speaker, the difference between the Senate and the House of Representatives is the difference between 6 and half a dozen. We are two twin brothers, and by the grace of God, inseparable. It's asked me to say, together, we will work to ameliorate and palliate the problems of this country. We must continue to carry out our legislative function without fear or favor. And it's asked me to personally congratulate the House of Representatives that is very, very proud of you and that you have done fantastically well within these 2 years. I also want to say, as a messenger, I am very proud of this chamber. You have demonstrated courage. The Speaker has demonstrated intellectual mobility and political sagacity. And members have also, when I saw the volume, numbers of bills passed by the House, I will say that you have A+ in legislative responsibilities. Without belaboring us with unnecessary commentaries and rhetorics, lest I'm being accused of suffering from verbal diarrhea, I want to say that we will continue to partner with the House as brothers and partners in progress, but the function of a legislator cannot be actualized without courage. So this morning, or afternoon, I'm sorry, I preach courage to the members of the House of Representatives that without fear or favor, we must pilot the affairs of this nation. Once again, the Senate President congratulates you and see everyone here as his brothers and sisters. I use the opportunity to also appreciate the wives of legislators, immaculately attired and cosmopolitanly fashioned behind. My singular prayer on a last note, on a light note, is that may you remain the wives, no more wives for these members. Thank you and God bless you.
We'll continue to make haste. Representative of zones will speak. The first is the Caucus leader of the Northeast, Honorable M.T. Mongono. And you have maximum of 3 minutes. Please let's obey that so that we can quickly round up this session.
The Honorable Speaker.
I think you have to come and speak here so that you can face the cameras. The cameras are all behind you.
The Honorable Speaker, Honorable Yakubu Dogara, the Deputy Speaker, leaders of the House, former presiding officers, former leaders of the House, my colleagues, other invited dignitaries, on behalf of our wives, thank you very much, so that I will not be locked out of the other room. Our wives and other invited dignitaries, you are all welcome to the second anniversary of the 8th House of Representatives. As leader of the Northeast Caucus, I want to seize this opportunity to thank the membership of the 8th House of Representatives for the unanimity with which the Northeast Development Commission Bill was passed into law. This is a clear manifestation that, in tandem with our legislative agenda and also in consonance with Section 4 of the 1999 Constitution as amended, that gave us the power to amend, to make laws for the peace, order, and good governance of this country, we legislate taking into consonance the yearnings and aspirations of the people of this country. And it is a clear reflection that this House is responsible and responsive to the yearnings and aspirations of this country. And I sincerely thank you for that singular feat and unanimity with which this law was passed, because of the distraction that is occasioned by the Boko Haram insurgency in the Northeast. And I assure Nigerians that as we proceed to our subsequent years before the expiration of our tenure, we are going to make laws for the peace, order, and good governance of this country in accordance with the yearnings and aspirations of the people of this country. Thank you very much.
Next will be Honorable Jeff Emmanuel for North Central.
Mr. Speaker, because I have 3 minutes, allow me to adopt your protocol as mine. And I speak on behalf of the North Central. The North Central, I should remind you, is made up of 6 states and the federal capital, and we have 51 members on the floor. I bring a message of solidarity from the North Central to the leadership of the House of Representatives under Speaker Dogara, and indeed the leadership of the National Assembly. For those who were in the 7th Assembly, you will recall that by the 2nd year, we have fought 2 major battles. And in the process, we lost a member. In the process, we removed the Speaker. In hindsight, I think, 6th Assembly, I beg your pardon. In hindsight, I think things could have been done differently, should have been done differently, but you can't reverse time, and we can only take the lessons from there. To be fair, we had our own fair share of fisticuffs in the 8th Assembly. And bloody noses were recorded, but I think we have moved on. I listened to the speech of the guest speaker, and even though you could contest 1 or 2 things that he said, I think what he has done is to put the giant mirror before us and ask us to look into the mirror and move on from there. In my vantage position as chairman of Rules and Business, I want to corroborate the fact or the statistics that were read out by the speaker. We have done quite a lot, and I think we ought to be very proud of ourselves. And I think the North Central will continue to contribute its quota to the stabilization of this House, hence going forward. Last Monday, the National Assembly, Mr. Speaker, you recall, celebrated 1 year of NASBA. NASBA, for those who don't know, is National Assembly Business Environment Roundtable. It's a collaboration between the National Assembly, as was put together by the leadership, and the private sector to identify the laws that we facilitate the ease of doing business. Now, when we celebrated it, for those who were there, the private sector was full of praises because the core mandate of that body is to identify the laws that will ease doing business in Nigeria. And we have started the process, and they were full of praises. And so I think, and yours sincerely is representing the House in the capacity of a co-chair, along with my Senate counterpart. And I think this is something I thought I should mention. Finally, Mr. Speaker, for those of our colleagues who thought that celebrating 2 years, putting together this event is not the best idea, I just want to, before I leave, bring out a quotation. I have a quotation here. It's from Abraham Joshua Heschel. He said, "People of our time are losing the power of celebration. Instead of celebrating, we seek to be entertained. Celebration is an active state, an act of expressing reference or appreciation. To be entertained is a passive act or a spectacle. Celebration is a confrontation, giving attention to the transcendent meaning of one's action. Mr. Speaker, I'll say no more. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Before we move on, as quickly as possible by way of recognition, we have in our presence former members who have transmutated into the Senate. Senator Atai Idoko is with us here, two-time member of this House. Senator Barau Jibrin, one-time chairman, House Committee on Appropriations. Also in the chambers, former clerk to the National Assembly, Alhaji Ibrahim Salim, and Alhaji Ibrahim Arab. And our own clerks to the House of Representatives. Mr. Omini is here, Mr. Nii Ajiboye, Mr. Gani, who just left a few weeks ago, and Mrs. Cordelia. They're all here. Pardon? And Alhaji Umaru Sani is not here. There are all other wives of honorable members that I skipped. Honorable Nkoma Pat Isadu, Mrs. Nkoma Pat Isadu, Mrs. Goodluck Opia Comfort, Mrs. Josephine Lazarus Ogbe, Mrs. Ibokwe Nkechi Ginika, Mrs. Oku Sarah, Mrs. Kemisola Oladimeji, Hajia Khadija Ajana, Hajia Jamila S. Salihu Shadafi. You're all welcome. Other distinguished senators have just walked in. Some of them were former honorable members. I'll announce them as I get the list. Almost all of them. Well, I'll personally recognize you when I get the list because I'm not in position to do that now. So quickly, let me have the list. So we move on to the third goodwill message, and that will be delivered by no other person than our own Amazon, representing special interests. That's that of representative of female honorable members, the Right Honorable Nenna Elendu Ukeji. 3 minutes.
Very short. Mr. Speaker, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Deputy Speaker, leaders, invited guests, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all. I would like to thank you very much for the opportunity accorded me this morning to be one of the very few select speakers on this occasion, the second anniversary of the 8th Assembly. Without prejudice to the very brilliant submissions of the other speakers before me, I'd like to point out that this anniversary is a day that fills me with mixed feelings, a sense of triumph and elation, trepidation and foreboding, and a deep urge for stabilization and rectification. There is a widely imbibed broad consensus that the legislature is necessary in a democracy and that it is the only institution that is the voice of the people in government. It is the bastion of our democracy and it's fundamental to the legitimacy of our government. Sometimes people who have a legislature, we deride our legislature and we even bemoan its existence until we are reminded that it was the quest for democratic institutions such as this, our legislature, that would represent the interest of all the citizens that led to several uprisings around the world, and most recently, the uprising in North Africa, popularly referred to as the Arab Springs in 2019, a sad situation that had a death toll of over 3,500 people. Pivotal as our legislature is to our system of government, Our legislative institutions have been considerably weaker than they should be. The twin legacies of colonialism and militarism have conspired to ensure that. Authoritarian regimes, when replaced by democratic institutions, requires long-term commitments, education, and hard work for all true democratic institutions and practices, such as oversight, lawmaking, appropriations, representation, to take root. We have made considerable progress in the struggle to establish independent, sustainable legislative institutions. 18 years on, the question is, has our legislature grown alongside our democracy? The answer is unfortunately no. The legislature still has not found a comfortable place in the tri-party spectre of democratic governance. The problems facing individual legislators and legislature are tetra-headed, as highlighted by the keynote speakers. We battle high attrition rate, weak legislative support systems, weak institutional memory. We also battle perception problems. It is a known fact that the average citizens view the average politician with skepticism. After many years of totalitarian government, with the absence of the legislature, there is scant, if any, understanding of the functions of the legislature. This perception is not helped by the democratization of information, the social media and mainstream media entrenching that perception. The expectations of the legislature and legislators are sometimes unrealistic. The perception of elected representatives is that, as a Caesar's wife, we should be beyond reproach, and the knee-jerk reaction of questioning the relevance of the legislature when these high expectations are not met. Add that to the problem of our institution jostling for survival and relevance in the political space, skewed against its very existence. Our constitutional duties have become questions about what are the powers of our appropriation, what are questions about our power of oversight, questions about delegated legislation, questions about the strength of our past resolutions have become resounding and frequent from quarters you would expect would know better. But these are generic. Now is the time for me to get granular. I have spent 10 years, today marks my 10th anniversary in the legislature, and I feel that makes me eminently qualified to speak to these issues. And when people complain about the composition of the legislature and the quality of legislators, I say to them that we're reflective of the larger Nigerian society. Today, unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, my dear colleagues, I've never seen a Nigeria that is more fractured or fragmented, where nepotism, tribal politics, religion take center stage, where hate speeches, cries of secession, calls for restructuring and eviction rent the air. Hitherto, the one thing you could say for the Nigerian legislator and the legislature was that we were unapologetic patriots. Even though people rode on platforms of different political parties and came from far-flung areas of our great country, we came to the National Assembly and swore to protect, defend, and uphold one constitution and one country, the Federal Republic of Nigeria. It was in that spirit that the untried, untested doctrine of necessity was born when our dear country danced dangerously on the brink. It was in that same spirit that the law of emergency rule was passed for the Northeast when Boko Haram threatened the territorial integrity of our great country. Again, it was that same spirit that drove the taking over of state legislatures from the east, from the west, from the north, and from the south when our collective democracy was threatened. It was in that same spirit, my dear colleagues, Mr. Speaker and invited guests, that appropriations and supplementary appropriations were passed in the interest of our dear country. Mr. Speaker, sir, this parliament stood as band of brothers, shoulder to shoulder, when this National Assembly was tear-gassed. And we came back and we sat and we took decisions in the interest of our great country. It was that spirit of nationalistic pride, cohesion, inclusive growth, and responsiveness that Parliament stepped in when the rest of the country threw up their arms in confusion, frustration, and exasperation. And now today, as the threads again that hold us together are starting to erode in the national discourse, this again is time for us to show responsive leadership, to rise above parochial interests, to be fair-minded, inclusive, not only to sections, tribe, religion, or parts of the country, but also to remember the tenets of the Constitution that we swore to uphold, and also to recognize the gender agenda. I have watched Honorable Femi Gbaja and Honorable Leo Ogo speak copiously from the Constitution as they have spoken about our cohesion. Mr. Speaker, sir, as a woman, I want us to remember the gender agenda, that 51% of our population deserves at least 35% representation as we seek to build a more unified, integrated country. Finally, Mr. Speaker, my dear colleagues, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, every morning we say a prayer, and I want us, my brothers who are fasting and my Christian brothers, to take our minds back to that prayer, 1 minute, and remember the words of the prayers that we say every day. Almighty God, ruler of heaven and earth, we beseech thee to inspire and guide all our counsels and actions, so that we may always walk in the path of love, charity, and honesty to one another. Help us with your grace to do only those things that will promote the unity, prosperity, and happiness of our great country. Thank you very much.
Before we take on the next speaker, let me recognize the distinguished senators who walked into the chambers just as I was rounding up the recognition. They are all former members of this House. We have in our presence or in our midst distinguished Senator Ahmed Lawan, who is the leader of the Senate, former member of this House. We have distinguished Senator Binta Masi Garba, distinguished Senator Relwan Adesoji Akambi. We have distinguished Senator Abubakar Kyari, distinguished Senator Solomon Olamilekun Adiola, that's public accounts. Senator Clifford Odia, distinguished Senator Biodun Olujimi, and distinguished Senator Fatima Raji Rosaki. Well, I don't know whether the present members here will attempt to complete the revolution in the Senate, but I'm not wishing anyone ill luck. Wives of honorable member, the last but not the least, Mrs. Lala Mohammed Gololo. Next speaker, time is far gone, so please, a 3-minute rule is sacrosanct. Next speaker will be Honorable Chukwuka Onyema, leader of the Southeast.
The Right Honorable Speaker, Deputy Speaker, honorable colleagues, I want to stand on existing protocol because of time. The responsibility and mantle of speaking on behalf of the 43 members of the Southeast falls on my shoulders, and I'm honored to carry that charge on behalf of my people. Our mandate as representatives remain important to building a stronger nation and in deepening democracy in Nigeria. In this regard, we are committed to encouraging and supporting reforms in all regions in order to achieve national success and integration. Our democracy, although young, has witnessed significant progress over the years. A celebration of this nature calls on us to reflect collectively as a nation on how far we have come, how best we can achieve progress. As we enter into the third session of the 8th Assembly, it is our belief that the House will reconsider its position on the Southeast Development Commission bill that is intended to douse agitation in the zone and consequently drive development in the Southeast. we believe that the Southeast Zone, given all the support it requires, has the capacity to contribute immensely to economic growth and stability in Nigeria. We also use this medium to appeal to the federal government in this House to consider of utmost importance the construction of several infrastructural deficiencies we have in the Southeast. We are resolute to ensuring full implementation of the legislative agenda of the 8th House of Representatives. For the more we are together, the happier we shall be. In conclusion, we on behalf of the people of the Southeast Zonal Caucus congratulate all distinguished senators, all honorable members of this 8th House of Representatives, and pray for God to guide and strengthen us to do only those things, like my sister said, that will promote the peace, unity, happiness, and prosperity of Nigeria. Amen and amen.
Thank you very much, Right Honorable. Honorable colleagues, by way of recognition, we have in our midst a man I consider, for all of us, regard as a father, a distinguished statesman and nationalist. There's no other person than distinguished Senator Dr. Joseph Wayas, the President of the 4th Senate. He's seated somewhere at the back there, and he's raising his hands. So we're glad to have you here, sir. You're welcome. We move on. Next will be the Minority Leader, Right Honorable Leo Okwuogo.
Your Excellency, Mr. Speaker, Your Excellency, the Deputy Speaker, for want of time, let me, with due humility, adopt the existing protocols. Let me first and foremost, let me on behalf, I said adopt the existing protocols, please. Let me on behalf of myself and the members of the South and the opposition in general congratulate this wonderful House for standing firm in the defense of democracy. I want to state with all emphasis that we have here completed 2 years. Please give me your ears. We have here completed 2 years in our journey of making good laws for the good governance of this great nation. We have spent continuously as a nation 18 years of uninterrupted governance. It therefore means that it calls for a major congratulations. I also want to thank everybody here for the cooperation that we have achieved so far from the opposition and also from every other members of this House for making sure that democracy thrives. Because I've always emphasized that democracy thrives only where there is viral opposition. Without viral opposition, what you will end up having is nothing but autocracy. It is therefore important that now that we have been able to put a foundation on ground, it becomes also important that we call on the executives, work hand in hand with the executive to strengthen one major lacking in our democratic practice and institutions, which borders on our democratic institutions. The hour and time has come as a nation for us to strengthen our institutions. These institutions must all be totally independent. The concept where institutions are being mismanaged by some arm of government is totally unacceptable. It doesn't help in every democracy. I think it is important, Mr. Speaker, that we must take this as a major lesson so that as we move on, we definitely know that we will have a country where your freedom of opinion, where your freedom of speech will be totally respected. The ideology and the concept of media trials, where people are pronounced guilty in a system where there is democracy, where the law stipulates that you are not guilty until proven guilty, must be abandoned. This is not democracy. So I want to congratulate every member that has stand very firm and continue to stand firm to speak. Your right to speak should always be defended. Let nobody coerce you, nobody intimidates you to make speeches that you don't want to make. I stand firm to defend democracy. I stand firm for my right as a legislator, and I want every member of this House, no matter the scenario, no matter the challenges, to defend the principles of democracy, because the worst democratic government is 1,000,000 times better than any military regime. So I congratulate you all, and we look forward to another 2 years where we will stay together as brothers and sisters. Congratulations.
Thank you, Minority Leader and Leader of the South-South. Next speaker will be the Whip, Honorable Alhassan Adodokwa, who will speak for the Northwest. Our golden rule of 3 minutes because of time.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على النبي الكريم. Your Excellency, the Speaker, Right Honorable Yakubu Dogara, and the Chairman of this session, let me very respectfully stand on the laid down protocol. Mr. Speaker, I would like to first of all seek your leave and the leave of the House to put a very critical and fundamental clarification that has got to do with my personality as the leader of a polygamous house in Kano. I heard you while introducing the spouses of members, you said Binta Alhassan Ado Dogwa. I want to say with all emphasis, Mr. Speaker, to avoid standing the risk of being locked out of the 3 other rooms of my polygamous family. To avoid, Mr. Speaker, I want to put it again, to avoid the risk of being locked out of the 3 other good rooms of my polygamous family, that I want to put on record that Alhassan Ado Dogwa is also married to Halima Alhassan Ado, married to Bilkisu Alhassan Ado, married to Umma Alhassan Ado. It is only, Mr. Speaker, it is only in the spirit, it is only in the spirit of a united polygamous house that the 3 other wives of mine nominated and mandated one of them, just like the speakers did, to come here and stand in for them. Mr. Speaker, after my presentation, Mr. Speaker, I hope the clerk will also put this on record. Mr. Speaker, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I want you to give me a very good round of applause for keeping a united family. Mr. Speaker, going into my remarks, sir, I would like to borrow from the tone you have set in your presentations in the opening remarks, where you said rightly that even though we may not necessarily be in the mood to celebrate, that we have found cause to hold this session, at least to keep to history and to keep to the convention of the institution of the House of Representatives. Mr. Speaker, I'm coming from that background to say that let us now use this opportunity. Let us use this platform to only reflect. And while we are reflecting, Mr. Speaker, honorable members, let us reflect inward and let's reflect outward. Because for an institution like this, we cannot run in isolation of other institutions or organizations that have formed key factors in the democratic process of this country. Mr. Speaker, there is nothing wrong if we have seen where we have found wanting, we make amends. Mr. Speaker, there is nothing wrong if we are found deficient in the discharge of our responsibilities one way or the other. We look at those deficiencies with a view to rectifying them and do the right thing in accordance with the expectation of our own people. Mr. Speaker, having said so, with regard to our own context here as members of the House of Representatives, I want to rise here, Mr. Speaker, with all sense of responsibility and with high sense of humility, sir, to say that while we look inward and address our problems, we must also have to rise and look outward, to look at other arms of government, to look at other agencies of democracy, the civil society, the members of the fourth estate of the realm, the media, and other stakeholders as far as our Nigerian democracy is concerned, to let them understand, to realize that an institution like the House of Representatives has a cause to be respected. Mr. Speaker, having served for quite long on the floor of this House as far back as 1992, I stand here to make a bold statement that despite the achievements we have made, even going by the appraisals made by so many speakers here, this House remains to have a very major challenge. And this challenge has consistently been a challenge of negative public perception about the House of Representatives and the National Assembly by extension. And Mr. Speaker, even though we may not be the right people to judge ourselves, we may not be the right people to readdress public perception about the institution of the House of Representatives, Mr. Speaker, I feel when there is a duty for someone to make, and he has failed or reneged in doing that duty, there is nothing wrong if we rise to defend ourselves. Mr. Speaker, I want to say without any fear of contradiction that it's unfortunate that at this point of our journey in nationhood, at this point of our journey in democracy, that up till now, Mr. Speaker, there are a lot of controversies, a lot of insinuations as regards our powers to even appropriate. It's quite unfortunate, Mr. Speaker, when I learned that in the executive arm of government, that there is a move now, that there is a move, whether rightly or wrongly, whether formally or informally, I've learned that there is a move that the executive arm of government, through whatever process, are approaching the judiciary for an interpretation of whether the National Assembly has powers to appropriate or the limit of our powers. Mr. Speaker, I want to say on behalf of all of you here, whether interpretation in the court, interpretation on the street, I want to say without any fear of contradiction that our powers to appropriate, our powers to oversight, our powers to also overhaul the governance of this nation, being the key holders of the mandate of the Nigerian people, is unquestionable. Mr. Speaker, it's unquestionable. And it is also unfortunate if up to this point you could have somebody contemplating our constitutional mandate. If you have somebody who could still subject our responsibility as enshrined in the Constitution to unnecessary controversy. Mr. Speaker, I want to urge that it's not our business alone. We have our former leaders that are seated very respectfully here, without undermining or prejudicing the kind of solidarity they have been playing to protect this institution. I want to urge them to still do more. And I want to urge our members to also rise on their 2 feet to make sure that we can work and rise in protection of the House of Representatives and the National Assembly by extension. Mr. Speaker, it is my belief that we have done very well. Mr. Speaker, it's my conviction that the 8th House of Representatives, having said that I'm one of the very few oldest serving members of this House of Representatives. I started as far back as 1992. The Right Honorable Speaker, Abuja, seated there, was my first speaker. I want to say by comparison that if actually we had been able to introduce over 1,000 bills on the floor of this House, if actually we have been able to pass over 160 bills passed here, Mr. Speaker, and if certainly we have over 500 bills awaiting consideration or at various levels of considerations, this House, for me, stands to be the best out of all other houses that I have served as a member of the House of Representatives. I stand to be corrected. Mr. Speaker, on this note, I want to congratulate members of the 8th House of Representatives for the distinguished discharge of their responsibilities as members of this 8th House of Representatives. I stand here as a proud person being a member of this august assembly. Mr. Speaker, I also want to congratulate you. You all know that if this House of Representatives were to be likened to an aircraft with Dogara as the pilot, it is my belief that the takeoff was very rough. But we thank God Dogara has taken up well. I believe in the process of cruising with this our able pilot and with Lasun as his co-pilot, we are now cruising very comfortably. We have passed the turbulence. We have also succeeded in managing the turbulence. Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate you for sustaining and securing effective stability even in the leadership and by extension to the membership of this House of Representatives. And I want to assure you that by God's grace and by the commitment and support of our members on the floor here, this flight that is destined to land in 2019 will land very safely. Mr. Speaker, I also want to add, Mr. Speaker, that if we land by 2019, and for any reason you have a cause to continue the flight, just let me know. I will make sure you don't miss my boat again. If you have a cause to fly this flight again after 2019, just let me know so that I will make sure you don't miss my vote again. Remember, you missed my vote the other time. Thank you. May God bless Nigeria and God bless the National Assembly.
Please, because of time, maximum we have is 10 minutes. I recognize the House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the Deputy Speaker, let me single out in recognizing the leader of the opposition, Honorable Leo Ogo. And let me also single out, before I stand on existing protocol, all the wives in absentia who are not here with us, particularly the 3 and many other wives, Honorable Dogwa. Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues, there is no gainsay. It is very clear to us, to all, that we started with a very tumultuous beginning. I was one of the principal actors. This House was sharply divided into 2. But I stand here today particularly happy that in no time this House came together as one. So that very rough beginning appears to me and to the whole world has ended and will end very well. Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues, I've always said that the 4th House was better than the 5th House, the 5th better than the 6th, the 6th better than the 7th, and even in the 2 years of the 8th Assembly, it appears that the 8th Assembly is better than the 7th Assembly. And this is the way it should be, because we are making progression. As we celebrate, and I believe each day of democracy must be celebrated, as we celebrate this day, this midterm, I believe it is important to also look at the institution critically. Because if we criticize ourselves, or in criticizing ourselves, that is the only way we can make progress and make amends. Out of the 18 years of this 4th Republic, I have served for 14 years. Mr. Speaker, in order for us to strengthen our institution and deepen our democracy, we must look at things from a very critical eye. There are areas where we have dropped the ball. In the area of checks and balances, Mr. Speaker, there's still a lot to be done by this House. I believe that it is because we have dropped the ball in the areas of checks and balances, that is why we have motions on a daily basis on this House that result in investigations. If we had done our work, those things would have been nipped at the bud. So I want to encourage members of various committees that as we proceed, we must go out there, follow the money to wherever it may lead. In the areas of resolutions of this House, Mr. Speaker, we know that this House, or a legislative House, works through resolutions. Bills can take upwards of a year to 2 years. But issues come up on a daily basis in Nigeria that require that we deal with them by way of resolution. Unfortunately, our resolutions have not produced the desired results. And one of the reasons for this, Mr. Speaker, I believe, is that we have not strengthened our compliance committee. And I believe as we go forward, the Committee on Compliance must be given the necessary teeth to bite if they need to. I believe this House should begin to exercise its constitutional powers, given to it expressly in Section 88 and Section 89. There have been reasons, and this might be very controversial. There have been reasons over the years where agencies, heads of agencies, ministers, I dare say, who are subject to the power of arrest, have not been threatened with such. Even though on a daily basis, members of committees invite ministers, invite agencies, and they thumb their noses to the invitation of the committees. This cannot continue. If we want respect for this institution, if we want this institution to be what it's supposed to be, Mr. Speaker, I think one example needs to be made. And I will, even though I work for the government, I lead the House and I lead the government business, I will be the first to push for that one example. Mr. Speaker, there's an area that I have often, since the 7th Assembly, talked about. And I want to use this opportunity to talk about it again. And that is the area of public petitions. Mr. Speaker, in your address, you said we have had over 500 petitions. That should not be the case. Public petitions are public petitions. But today we have, and it's not the 8th Assembly, the 6th, the 7th, it's always been like that, where we almost are stepping or neglecting the issue of separation of powers, and we are discharging judicial functions on the floor of this House. Petitions are not meant to be issues that are subject to litigation. We have three arms of government: the judiciary, the legislative, and the executive. We need to address very squarely and frontally the issue of members of our constituency bringing issues of termination of employment, breach of contract to the floor of this House. Mr. Speaker, we need to also begin to fashion out a way where we fast-track movement of our bills. There are bills that are stuck in the mills of this House, 1 year, 2 years. And these are important bills we need to find out to fast-track and get them out of the system to the executive for signature. Mr. Speaker, more importantly, I believe we need to fully automate our IT system for efficiency and for, again, ease of doing business in the House. A House in the 21st century or 22nd century, or wherever we are, that is still littered with papers and manual procedure is not a House that is moving with the times. And I think we need to do something very drastically about this. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I want to touch on two areas that my very good friend, our guest speaker, talked about. And I want to put it in context. The issue of the Senate bringing up a motion wherein the Senate leader's reputation was touched or discussed on the pages of the editorial of this day newspaper should not be poo-pooed the way it appears to have been. One must put it must be contextual. A newspaper has the potential of reaching millions of people both at home and abroad. And anything that touches on the Senate leader, or any senator for that matter, touches on the whole institution. And I think it is in that context that our guest speakers should look at it as not, oh, it's not important enough. Yes, of course, there are other actions that have been taken. But by bringing the matter up on the floor of the Senate, effectively, the Senate has sent a message to the constituents of the Senate leader, and to everybody. It has reverberated around the world that that thing never happened. So there's more than one way to skin a cat, like they say. Mr. Speaker, I also want to address the issue which the guest speaker mentioned about plenary, about absentee legislators. Again, it's a misconception and a misunderstanding of the role and the work on how legislators work. A lot of people misunderstand and believe that the work of a legislator begins and ends at plenary session. Unfortunately, there can be nothing further from the truth, a very erroneous belief. In fact, many believe that the more productive or the most productive time of a legislator is outside of plenary. Whilst you may not see people at plenary, and I'm just using this opportunity to talk to the whole world, our members and their committees slaving away, working, oversighting, investigating, and doing all sorts of things that are more productive than even being in plenary. So we need to put these things in context. I have had the privilege of visiting several parliaments all over the world, including the United States, we fashion our democracy under. And I remember vividly when we went then with Speaker Tambua. We went into the chambers, and the chambers was empty. There were a few members who were debating issues. And we found out then that apparently members are in their offices working. They only come to chambers when it's time to vote. And if it's a vote, an issue they are particular about, that is when they come to the floor to vote. So it is important that we put these things in perspective and understand how the legislature works. Honorable colleagues, let me use this opportunity to say that I have enjoyed working with each and every single one of you from across the aisle, PDP, APC, the women, particularly the women. And as we celebrate, I want us to use this opportunity to take time out, individually and collectively, to pray for our president. These are trying times, and he needs our prayers, just like the country needs our prayers. Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues, I congratulate us on this midterm. And I believe that we will come back in 2019 and know that we have done so much and covered so much 2 years from now. Thank you, and God bless.
Okay. Thank you, Leader, for that delivery. Honorable colleagues, please, let's take our seats. We were meant to test the e-voting system, but because time is gone, I think we can skip that and do it on Tuesday. The clerk, have you distributed the cards? So we have to return them, please. If it's not yours, like this is mine, so I can go with it. But if the card you are having on your deck is not yours, please return it. We'll try the e-voting system on Tuesday, because there's no time today. So having said that, it's now my privilege to recognize the Deputy Speaker who will come and deliver the vote of thanks. And be mindful of time because we're inching into Mock's time.
Essentially, what I've been asked to come and do is not quite different from what the Speaker has been doing the last almost 1 hour. To first recognize, acknowledge the presence of people who have been invited, and to also thank them for coming. And so it's just like the last leg of, by way of thanking them all over again. And so I'm happy that I've been given the easiest part of this job, not challenging, and it's not intellectual, like the way Ineda and the leader of the House presented their speech. So in that context, I do not have the luxury. In that context, I do not have the luxury of adopting the existing protocol. So I have to find a way of going through over the protocol once again to make sure that they are well recognized. And so I'll start. Right, Honorable Speaker? Do we say thank you for coming, or thank you for leading the House in the manner you have led the House in the last 2 years? Honorable colleagues, like the leader of the House said, I always call him Femi because he's my brother, and I want to reiterate that on June 9, 2015, this House was sharply divided into 2 equal houses. But today, after 2 years, we are seated here celebrating the 2nd year of the 8th Assembly. It's a milestone, and to all of us, we must be proud that we are members of this particular House. So, honorable colleagues, who incidentally, you are all my bosses, I congratulate you, and I thank you for coming too, specifically for the main reason that Friday is not normally a regular sitting day. So thank you too. Let me now go to those we invited. On the far left, we have former presiding officers, ranging from speakers, deputy speakers, who have come, they saw, and they conquered. And in their own mind, where they are seated, they will begin to think back and see whether we're actually making progress, or progresses have been made since when they were there and left and now. But I can assure you that we have made progress because this is the 18th year of unbroken democratic experience. So to former presiding officer, thank you for coming. We also have the presiding officers too, who have seen too, and we have always invited you, and you have always been coming. So thank you very much for coming. I will also recognize, let me quickly do this, the executives. There is what you call executive tyranny. When you recognize the person that is occupied the executive seat, you quickly go and recognize the wife. So our wives are very important in this case. Our wives, thank you for coming. This is where we normally sit. This is where they normally criticize us, and that is what we do every day, and that is why we are also being criticized. It is the only arm of government. Honorable colleagues, I'm not going to turn myself to a chief whip. Your deputy speaker is giving vote of thanks, and I deserve to be listened to in silence. You see, our wives, we pity you in the sense that in a democratic setting, this is the only arm of government that does and performs its function in the public. And that is why we are most criticized. People forget that aspect of our job. It is because we do our job in the public, we are open to the public, and that is why we are most criticized. The executive will speak in files. The judiciary will tend to kind of interpret the Constitution in a manner that is either confusing or technical, so as to make sure that when you are not initiated, you don't understand their language. But the language of legislator is well understood because it's plain language, and we do it in the open. So when we do it, we are criticized. Our wives, we welcome you. We have our distinguished senators. Some of them have left, but it is instructive to note at this point that in the present Senate as it's constituted, about 47 members, I don't know whether that statistic is correct now, but it's as high as that. About 47 members of the current Senate are former members of this particular house. And in my own estimation, that's a form of improvement, because what they learned here, they have taken it to the other side, and that is why Senate too is becoming more robust in terms of the legislative jobs. To our guest speakers, I'm going to come back to them, like Femi did, but I'm going to borrow the language of Honorable Adekola from Ekiti. When he said, relooting the loot, I'm not going to criticize or re-criticize the critics, but I'm only going to tell them that whether we like it or not, aside the fact that it has been propagated and everybody is agreeable to it, that democracy is still the best form of government, and that Nigeria has made progress in our democratic experience. So our guest lecturer, thank you for coming. Then, generally, ladies and gentlemen, and finally, let me add my own aspect, because like I said, the job given to me is the simplest part of this job, to give vote of thanks and go and sit. But I will not do that. I will start by saying that, first, 18 years of democratic unbroken experience is a major milestone. And what does that mean? That means a child born before May 29, 1999, even if it is May 28, 1999, by 2019 is qualified to go to vote and vote for respective leaders at different levels of government. If anybody says that is not a major one, it is a major milestone. And for that purpose alone, we should clap for ourselves that 18 years is long enough. And for those of us who are elites, educated, we now, these days, have 18-year-old graduating from the university. And that is why our democracy is becoming more complex and more criticized, because a child born in 1999, before May 29, 1999, you will be surprised that is more attuned with the happenings in the democratic world than most of us who are their parents. And so, to me, that's a major milestone, and that calls for celebration. And it's probably one of the reasons why we are seated here today to celebrate ourselves. We are not particularly even celebrating the second year of its assembly. We are probably celebrating that aspect of us that we tend to kind of sweep under the carpet. The other one that is also important, is that whether we like it or not, we have improved on our democratic experiences because of the happenings of the last 18 years. From the days when 6 members of House of Assembly in a state where there are 26 members who sit down and impeach a governor, but such occasions are being reverted in our court of laws. And in the last 2 years, we've never had that kind of experience, and that's an experience. We think it cannot happen, but it cannot happen because we have had the experience in the past, and people have discovered that it is no more fashionable for 6 members of the House of Assembly to go ahead and impeach a governor at that level. That's a major milestone, and it's an experience too. And we are here today to celebrate that kind of a situation. And finally, on our democratic experience, let me quote this popular quotation in a book that I've read several times, Parties and Politics in America. And that is what is missing in our political system. They said, there is no America without democracy. There is no democracy without politics. There is no politics without parties. And there is no party without compromise. In the last 18 years, whether we like it or not, we have had to compromise on so many issues because that is the basis of democratic experience. So finally, Mr. Speaker, let me quickly go to our guest lecturers. When Mr. Adeniyi said this, and I don't want it to pass just like that is challenging the House of Representatives, that by 2019, he would like to see a member of this House graduating and contesting for the presidency of Nigeria to become the president. Mr. Adeniyi should be reminded that there is no vacancy in Nassau Villa. Thank you very much.
The House now, distinguished Senator Philip Aduda. A round of applause for him. And please, I want to beg of us before we take our leave, before we adjourn the session, I want us to take just 4 minutes. We'll take one Muslim prayer for the good health of Mr. President and for his return to Nigeria, and then a Christian prayer. So 4 minutes, maximum 2 minutes. I recognize Honorable Abdurrahman Shuaibu to give us the Muslim prayers, and Honorable Mrs. Joanne Mrakpo to give us the Christian prayers. So shall we rise, please? Observe this prayer.
Well, this is where we will round today's live broadcast of the special session of the 8th House of Representatives in commemoration of its 2-year anniversary. The Speaker in his speech said this special session is not for fun, but for an open appraisal and critique of the 8th House of Representatives in the last 2 years. We will now hand over to our studios for onwards transmission of our scheduled programs for the day. I am Ignatius Nkwo, and on behalf of our outside broadcast